Out on the edge of Dust Hollow there was a small ranch everyone knew by sight, though almost no one ever stopped. Folks called it the place of Carter, gentler than his cows, because the man who owned it, Eli Carter, almost never raised his voice to anyone. He was a little past 30, tall with broad shoulders, skin burned dark by the sun, hands shaped by reins and shovel handles. Yet whenever his eyes met a stranger's, he would look down fast, more like a schoolboy called to the front of the class than a landowner. He had never married. When his mother was still alive, she used to nudge him in the ribs every Sunday on the way into church. "Look there, Eli. That's Emma. Go say hello to the girl." Eli would just blush and pretend he was busy steadying her shawl. Then one winter, the coughing would not stop. The doctor came late. She slipped away before he could say anything kind or final. After that, the little two-room house held only one set of footsteps, one pair of hands on the dishes, one man listening to the wind slide through the cracks in the boards. One cold afternoon, the mail rider shoved a crumpled handbill into his hand. "Mail order brides," it said, "for Western gentlemen who need a housekeeper and a companion." That night, Eli set the paper on the table. He finished his supper, yet left the dishes where they were and just stared at the black print on thin paper. He had cattle. He had a roof. He had a little money. What he did not have was another voice in the kitchen to answer the wind. A small pair of shoes by the door beside his worn boots. Someone he could ask, "Was today hard on you?" He did not dare walk into the saloon and strike up a talk with anyone. He had no idea how to begin with the girls who stood outside the church after service. But paper did not look back at him. It did not wait for him to find the perfect words. So one evening, he trimmed the lamp a little higher and reached for a pen. His handwriting was large and a bit crooked yet clear. He wrote to the agency in Kansas City and said he owned a small ranch. No gambling, no drinking himself senseless, no lifting a hand to a woman. He admitted he was quiet and clumsy with words. He promised to work hard, to let his wife sleep through the storm nights, and if he remembered, to pick a few wildflowers on the way home and put them in his mother's old blue cup. He sent the letter off and felt as if he had done something bigger than buying more cattle. Days slipped by again. Eli still rose before dawn to feed the herd, mend fence, split wood. Some days he almost forgot the letter, until one morning the mail rider rode up to the gate and waved. Carter. The agency finally wrote back. Inside the envelope was a printed sheet and a handwritten letter from a woman named Nora Lane. Her script was small and even. She said she was 27, she could cook and mend. She had worked in a boarding house and on railroad kitchens. About family, she wrote only, "There is no one left to worry over me." At the end, she said, "If you want a warm roof and do not mind a woman who has seen more train stations than ballroom dances, I am willing to come." Eli read that letter 3 times. In those few lines, he felt something that sounded like his own heart. Too old for foolish dreams, yet still leaving one small corner open for hope. He wrote back with a short reply. He said that if she still wished to come, he would be waiting for her at the Dust Hollow stage stop. A few weeks later, the first telegram of his life came into town. Nora Lane arriving on Thursday afternoon coach. Please be present at the station. That afternoon, Eli scraped his beard in a hurry and smoothed his hair in a cracked mirror. He put on his best shirt, though the cuffs were frayed. Then he saddled his old horse and rode into town. The stage stop was busier than usual. Wives stood with their arms folded, whispering together. Children ran circles around the posts, playing and guessing what a mail-order bride might look like. Eli waited near the wooden steps, hand tight on the brim of his hat, heart beating like a drum. Wheels squealed on a skim of ice. The yellow coach rolled out of the dust and clouds of white breath. It pulled up and the driver swung the door open. A woman stepped down, pulling an old cloth bag behind her. Her hair was pinned up tight. A few dark strands had worked loose in the wind. Her coat was thinner than it should have been for winter. She lifted her head, and her brown eyes met Eli's. His breath hitched. This had to be Nora Lane. He drew a deep breath. He took a half step forward. The greeting he had practiced over and over waited on his tongue. Before he could speak, a small voice from inside the coach shivered out. "Mama, I'm cold." Then a second child's voice, higher. "Is this our new home, Mama?" Two small heads peeked out from behind Nora. One boy and one girl. Their eyes were wide as they stared at the tall cowboy boy, frozen on the steps. Eli Carter, the man who thought he had prepared himself for one stranger bride, felt every word he had ever learned scatter like dry leaves. He stood there on the platform, truly and completely speechless. Eli was still standing on the wooden step when the coach door swung open. The woman stepped down, bringing a rush of cold air and the faint smell of coal smoke that still clung to her coat. She was thinner than he had imagined, yet there was a clear, steady light in her eyes. Behind her, two children pressed close, each clutching a small canvas bag, as if that was all they owned in the world. She spoke first. "You must be Mr. Carter." Her voice was low and a little husky, not sweet, not shaky. Eli nodded, feeling as if his tongue had stuck to the roof of his mouth. "Yes, I'm Eli Carter," he managed, and every careful greeting he had practiced vanished. He forced out one more line out of pure manners. "My ranch is about a mile from here. If you'd like, we can head out now before it gets dark." Nora did not answer right away. She turned back and bent to speak softly to the children. "Stand close to me," she told them. "This is the rancher. If things go as planned, we'll be living on his land." The little girl with the brown, slightly curly hair edged forward half a step and looked straight at Eli. "What's your name?" he heard himself ask. "Emma," she said, then grabbed her mother's hand tighter. The boy, thinner, cheeks red from the cold, whispered, "I'm Joe." The wind cut across the yard and made the sign above the station creak on its chain. A few onlookers began to murmur. "Thought he ordered one bride," a man said loud enough for the crowd. "Looks like he got the whole herd." A woman pulled her scarf over her mouth. Her eyes slid from Nora to the children, then to Eli, the way someone might look over a cow just brought to market. Nora heard every word, yet she only tightened her grip on the small hands in hers. Then she turned back to Eli. "I was not as clear as I should have been in my letter," she said, each word laid down like a step on thin ice. "These two are my children. There is no father's name on any paper. If that makes you change your mind, I will find a way to move on with the next coach. I do not wish to trick anyone, and I do not wish to bring these children to a place where they are hated at the door." Eli had never seen anyone speak out the very thing that might make people turn away from them so plainly. He looked at Nora's face, then at the two small heads pressed against her side, and he remembered his own dark house with one plate on the table every night. He heard his mother's voice from years ago when they had read about folks selling off their children in hard times. "No child is a debt you throw away, Eli." Now that sentence was clearer than the wind whining along the fence. "My wagon has 4 seats," he said slowly. "I've never used all 4, but I haven't heard of any law against it." He lifted his head and for the first time made himself meet the woman's eyes. "If you still want to try making a life on my place," he went on, "then I figure my table is wide enough for 3 more bowls." Nora studied him for a long moment, as if she were testing whether those words could stand up to a season of dust and hard wind. At last, she gave a small nod. "I don't expect more than that," she said. "I ask only one thing. If the day comes when you believe you chose wrong, send me away, not the children. They have come far enough already just to hear grown people say they do not belong anywhere." That went straight to the softest place in Eli's chest. "I don't make a habit of tossing calves out of the pen because their mother did something foolish," he answered, his voice a little dry yet honest. "And I don't aim to learn that habit on human beings." The driver cleared his throat, snapping the moment in half. "Hey, Carter, you want her baggage off this coach or not? I've got another run to make." Eli started, then stepped forward and grabbed the canvas bag and the small wooden trunk. He turned back and offered his hand to help Nora up into his own wagon, clumsy as a boy touching a woman for the first time. Then he lifted Emma onto the seat and steadied Joe as the boy climbed after her. As the wagon jolted away from the station, he heard someone snicker behind him. "Just watch. Little ranch. Soft heart. Those 3 won't last 1 season out there." He tightened his hold on the reins and did not look back. The cold air stung his face, yet inside his chest something felt both warm and afraid, like a new flame in an old kitchen that needed 2 hands cupped around it to keep it alive. Nora pulled the children closer and tucked their hands inside her coat. Only when the road fell quiet, with nothing but hoofbeats and the creak of wheels around them, did she speak, her voice low enough for him alone. "Mr. Carter, if you want to know why I came here with 2 little ones and no husband, I will tell you. But not today. Today, I want the children to remember that this trip began with a man who did not turn his back when he saw them." "Today, that's enough," Eli said. "Let's just get home. The rest, we'll sort out tomorrow." The road from the stage stop to the ranch was not long. On both sides, there was only dry grass, fences, and a few low cactus clumps. The cold wind carried the smell of earth and cattle. Emma leaned her head against Nora's shoulder, and her eyes grew heavy. Joe sat as straight as he could and watched everything, as if he wanted to memorize the way in case they had to leave again tomorrow. When the little wooden house came into view, Eli suddenly saw it with different eyes. The dull tin roof, the slightly crooked steps, the window with the old curtain his mother had sewn. Until now, he had thought all that was enough. Now, with 3 more people about to live there, the whole place seemed smaller. He climbed down first and helped Nora, then the children. Emma tipped her head back to look and asked, "Is this your house?" "Yes," Eli said. "It's not big, but this roof has never let the rain reach the bed." Joe glanced toward the cattle pen, the woodpile, the well. "You've got a lot of work," he muttered. "So much you had to order yourself a wife through the mail." Nora stopped for a heartbeat, then let out a quiet laugh. Eli's face burned, but he laughed too. At least the boy was willing to speak up. That meant he did not see Eli as the scariest thing that had happened to him today. Inside, Nora's eyes went straight to the kitchen. The table had only 1 chair in its usual place. The other chair had been shoved off to the side. On the shelf sat a few chipped bowls, 1 blue cup and 2 spoons. 1 hung on a hook, 1 lay in a bowl. She did not have to ask to know that only 1 person had eaten here for a long time. "How long have you been on your own?" she asked as she swept a handful of dried potato peelings into a bucket. "Since my mother died," Eli answered. 4 years, give or take. Nora nodded. She did not sigh. She did not put on pity. She turned to the children instead. "Emma, Joe, put your bags on that bed out there," she said. "Tonight, we're going to eat here like it's our home, all right?" The sound of small feet running across the boards chased some of the empty echo out of the house. Nora opened the cupboard and looked over the few dishes. "If you don't mind, I'd like to straighten things up a little," she said. "I won't move anything important. Just enough so you don't spend half the morning hunting for a spoon." Eli nodded. "As long as you don't throw out that blue cup," he said, pointing. "That was my mother's. The rest, I hardly remember where I put it anyway." That first evening, they ate potato soup that Nora made from whatever was on hand. It was nothing fancy, but the smell of onions in the pan and just the right touch of salt warmed the little kitchen. Emma ate and looked around and whispered, "I like this chair. It squeaks, but it feels warm." Joe ate slowly. Now and then his eyes flicked to Eli, as if he were testing how quickly this man might lose his temper. Catching that look, Eli set his spoon down. "Do you know how to tie up a horse?" he asked. Joe shook his head. "No, I only ever tied down baggage so it wouldn't fall off a train car." "Tomorrow," Eli said, "I'll show you. My horses are a lot better tempered than a train car." Nora washed dishes at the basin. The well water was cold enough to numb her hands, but she did not complain. Eli wiped the table, a chore he used to leave until morning. No one talked much, yet the quiet had changed since the afternoon. It was less tight, less strange. It felt more like three people sharing the same thin blanket and agreeing to scoot closer. When the children were finally asleep together on the small bed in the front room, Nora stood in the doorway and looked out over the yard. The western sky was full of stars. The air was cold and dry. Eli stepped out behind her and stayed a little way off. "I know," he said. "Tomorrow folks will have plenty to say. About you showing up with two young ones, and about me not knowing everything before I sent my money." Nora kept her eyes on the sky. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Eli was quiet for a moment. "Since this afternoon," he said slowly, "the thing I keep thinking about is how this is the first time I've come home and not seen that blue cup staring back at me alone on the table." He let out a breath and it turned white in the dark. "If I ever do regret something down the road, I don't reckon it will be that there were two more children sitting at that table." News that Eli Carter had brought home a mail-order bride with two children traveled fast. By the first Sunday after Nora arrived, the yard in front of the Dust Hollow Church was more crowded than usual. When Eli's old wagon pulled up, a few people turned all the way toward the door. "There they are, the Carters," someone whispered. "3 of them. Where did those 2 little ones come from?" Nora climbed down, straightened Emma's scarf, smoothed Joe's hair, then turned to wait for Eli. He held out his hand to help her, forgetting all the eyes on the church steps. No one greeted them loudly, yet the low hiss of whispering around the pews was sharper than the sound of pages turning. During the service, Emma stared at the colored glass windows. Joe looked all around the room, not quite ready to believe he might be allowed to stay in this place. After the service, the dirt yard in front of the church filled with noise. A few wives came forward with thin smiles. "You must be Miss Lane," one said. "Came all that way just to land in this little nowhere town. Must mean you were out of roads to take." Another woman let her gaze slide down to the children. "3 of you. Must be costly traveling that far. Good thing Mr. Carter has such a generous heart." Nora heard every word, but only tightened her grip on the children's hands. "Every road costs something," she answered. "I only hope this stretch leads my children to a place where people call them by their right names." Emma tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Do they know my name?" Nora squeezed her hand. "If they don't, we'll say it ourselves," she murmured. Under the porch, Reverend Hale called Eli over. "Carter," he said, "I hear there is no husband's name on any of the papers. Are you sure you know who you've brought home?" Eli swallowed. "I don't know everything," he said. "I only know there were 4 bowls on my table this morning, and no drunk man smashing them." The minister sighed. This town is not used to a woman with children and no husband standing beside her. If you do not stand firm, they will push those 3 right on down the road. Eli looked out at the yard and saw Nora crouched to tie Joe's bootlace. Emma pressed in close against her side. "If anyone wants to run them off," he said slowly, "they'll have to go through me first." By noon, the children were nodding off in the wagon on the way home. In the kitchen, only the stove made a sound as it clicked and popped. Nora poured coffee and leaned back against the table. For a long moment, she did not speak. At last, she turned to him. "Today you stood beside me at church," she said. "If tomorrow people start telling a different story about me, do you need me to lay it all out for you?" Eli thought it over. "If you want to tell it, I'll listen," he said. "Not so I can decide whether to keep you here. I made that choice when I saw you step down off that coach with those 2. I'll listen so I know which places in you I shouldn't go stomping through." Nora held his gaze, then drew a breath. "I'm not a widow," she said. "I left the man the papers call my husband after the 3rd time he raised his hand to me, and after more times than I can count that he raised a bottle. These 2 carry his last name on paper, but I won't carry his name into any house ever again." Eli did not ask for details. He only answered, "Here, if one day they want to change it, they can take the name Carter. And if they'd rather keep only their own first names, I won't be the one shoving a new one onto them." Nora turned away and wiped a fast tear with the heel of her hand. For years, she had known only how to leave one place and move on to the next. For the first time, the thought of staying in one spot for a long while no longer scared her as much as the thought of picking up her bag and walking down the road yet again. Spring came to Dust Hollow. The ground was still dry, but the wind was no longer sharp. At the Carter Ranch, the mornings were not silent anymore. Emma dragged a chair across the floor. Joe ran after Eli toward the cattle pens. Nora lit the stove. The smell of coffee mixed with the smell of cornbread. On the shelf beside Eli's mother's blue cup, there were now 2 chipped cups. Each had a crooked little flower Emma had painted. One afternoon that seemed like any other, Emma walked into the kitchen with her eyes red. Joe followed, his hand wrapped tight around the strap of his school bag. Nora set the ladle down. "What happened?" she asked. Emma bit her lip. "A girl said I don't have a father," she whispered. "On the paper it only has Mama's name. She asked whose child I am." Joe muttered, "I wanted to hit her, but I was afraid we'd have to leave this place again." Eli was already standing in the doorway, a hammer still in his hand. He set it down and pulled out a chair. "Tomorrow we go to the school," he said slowly. "Names that grown folks write down are grown folks' business to answer." The next morning, he put on his best shirt and went with Nora and the children to the little school. The headmaster frowned at the empty space on the form where father's name belonged and cleared his throat as if to explain something. Eli did not shout, and he did not apologize. He said, "If putting a man's name on that line helps these 2 get asked fewer questions, then write mine. I am the one who keeps a roof over them and food on their plates. To me, that looks more like the word father than the name of the man who walked away. The headmaster nodded and wrote Eli Carter in the blank. That afternoon, after the children had fallen asleep over their books, worn out by the long day, Nora sat alone in the kitchen, turning a cup in her hands. Eli leaned against the doorframe. "Reverend Hale says if we want, he can come out any afternoon and do a wedding service," he said. "When I sent that letter, I wasn't thinking about marriage. But these last few days, when folks ask whose children they are, I realize I want my answer to be clearer than standing there quiet." Nora looked at him. "Are you asking this for Dust Hollow?" she said softly. "Or for the 4 people in this house?" Eli pulled a chair closer. "If nobody ever asks another thing," he said, "I still want to hear the footsteps of those 3 in this house. If you want nothing to change, we can leave it as it is. But if you are tired of carrying that bag from place to place, I think this little place can hold all 4 of us." 2 days later, the minister came in his old buggy. There were no flowers and no new clothes. They stood out on the porch while the wind carried the smell of young grass across the yard. The vows were short. When Nora said, "I do," her voice did not shake. Eli answered, "I do too," so fast that both of them laughed. Before he left, Reverend Hale bent down to Emma and Joe. "What do you children want folks to call you?" he asked. Emma squeezed Joe's hand. "If we can," she said, "I want to be Emma Carter." Joe drew a deep breath. "Me too," he added, "but I am still Mama's Joe." Eli crouched and gathered them both into his arms. "Any name will do," he told them, "so long as from now on, when someone asks whose children you are, you do not have to drop your heads." That night, Nora turned out the kitchen lamp, but stayed in the doorway for a long time. The western wind was still cold. It carried dust and the faint echo of trains she had left behind in other towns. On the wooden door of the small house, Eli had nailed up a new board. On it, carved clumsily but with care, were 2 words: Carter Home. The woman who had come here with 2 children and no husband's name in her pocket felt, for the first time in her life, that she was no longer a lodger passing through. If this story touched you even a little, go ahead and subscribe so we can keep meeting here each evening for these slow, gentle tales of the Old West. And if you believe everyone deserves a home where their name is written in love, tap like so I know you are still sitting on the other side listening.